My first music teacher used to say to us quite often, in the beginning was the rhythm. And if there were a special Bible for musicians, most probably it would start from this statement, in my opinion. But before diving any further in the topics of this video, let's quickly sort out the difference between pulse, tempo, and rhythm. So pulse is basically a constant ticking. When you give a beat to a piece, when you follow a piece with a certain beat, this is a pulse of this piece. The tempo is a speed with which you pulse. Yeah, so 1, 2, 3, 4, or 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. So that's the tempo. And the rhythm is a rhythmical pattern, a combination of faster and slower notes. So in case with this, for example, Polonaise by Chopin. This is pum 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 pum. This is the rhythm. Yeah, it's a rhythmical pattern. Pulsation of quarter notes would be pum 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 pum. So that's a pulsation of quarter notes. But we can also feel a pulsation of eighth notes. Pum 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 pum. And this is essential to be able to feel different layers of pulsations, not just quarter notes, but also sometimes larger pulsations of bars and sometimes shorter pulsations of eighth notes or even 16 notes. So pulse for musicians should be as real as matter, physical matter for physicists, let's say. We work with that matter, with that rhythmical matter. It should feel as real. Like, for example, in this Chopin's Impromptu number 1, which I also hope to cover on this channel in the nearest future. So if I feel just beats, 1, 2, 3, 4, then I have more chances to run when things go like a little bit more uncomfortable. 1, 2, 3. I might feel myself in a shaky position of running a little bit. But if I feel pa 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 pa, that level, it helps me to stay a tempo. It helps me to hold the horses a little bit and also find a like micro rubato, which would improve expressiveness, but also prevent me of running forward. And feeling larger levels brings more structure, unites the music. And in romantic music, also quite often you have to feel pulsation of bars or even phrases. Like, for example, in pretty much every Chopin valse, you have to feel pulsation of bars. 1, 2, 3, 1, 1, 2, 3. So this level of pulsations, larger level of pulsations, should be your primarily level of pulsations, like 1, 2, 3, 1, 1, bum. If I would have the same tempo, but if I would feel beats more, if beats would be my primarily level of pulsations, then this music immediately would sound you might feel that it kind of moves with a struggle. It's like walking with effort, being like 100 years old instead of flying around the ballroom with light feet dancing, or while you're still young, full of energy, without any health issues. So the difference is tremendous, depending on which level of pulsations you prioritize. In Baroque music, oppositely, you have to feel smaller levels of pulsations quite well. Like, for example, in this one. Like in this piece, of course, you have to feel 16 level pulsations, and one level above, 8 notes, pum, 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 pum. And this brings a lot of articulation and a very fine like micro rubato into your playing, ability to make fine micro rubato in your playing. In Baroque music, if you would prioritize beats, it sounds worse. This is also important for mastering an ability to play polyrhythms, especially complex polyrhythms, like, for example, 3 against 4. Most of people struggle with rhythmical structures like 1, when you have to play 4 notes in one hand and 3 notes in another hand, like 16 notes and triplets. And of course you can try to calculate like which note is supposed to play after which note, but in my opinion this is a counterproductive approach. I would suggest you to master such things first by establishing a very precise beat, like 1, 2, 3, and the best way is to tap the beat with your feet, with both feet. And you can say also always speak, because speaking helps us to train that articulation, to feel the beat better. 1, 2, 3, 4. So those are your beats, and then you fill them. You learn to fill them with a different amount of notes, with 16 notes, for example, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, and then with 3 notes, with triplets, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. If you're bored with numbers, you can say something like pizza, pasta, pizza, pasta, pizza, pasta, and then barbecue, barbecue, barbecue. But it should be very precise, and you should be able to switch from 4 notes in a beat to 3 notes in a beat, making them very smoothly, like dividing them very smoothly, spreading them smoothly through the beat. And then you continue tapping. So that's essential, to feel the beat, to feel a very precise beat. And then you just fill that beat with 4 notes, pizza, pasta, pizza, pasta, pizza, pasta, pizza, pasta, and then with 3 notes, barbecue, barbecue, barbecue. Always staying with the same precise pulsation, and then quickly switching hands. Bum, 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 bum. And then finally hands together, but you synchronize just the beat. Everything else within that beat, you just kind of spread more or less evenly as a butter on a bread. Yes, and you play that in a loop many times until you get it. Hands separately, then hands together, then again hands separately, and again hands together. So I prefer that kind of like practical approach to mastering polyrhythms than sitting with a ruler and counting which note is supposed to be like after a second, 16 note, and after a third. But of course, you're welcome to try other methods for mastering polyrhythms. So that's why the first step is in musical education very often is developing a steady sense of pulse, of pulsations, and of course sense of rhythm. For that purpose, musical education starts often not from playing actually or singing, but from different rhythmical games and exercises. Like for example, when a teacher gives you a pattern, pam, 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 and then they start just the first part of that pattern, pam, pam, and you're supposed to kind of catch it, pam, 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 and replicate, produce the rest, like precisely after the demonstration. Such rhythmical games, of course, are very useful, and there are tons of apps nowadays which you can use in order to train your rhythmical ability. For example, preparing this video, I have found an app which seems to be quite professional. This is not an affiliated marketing. I just tried it, and I think it's pretty good. It's called Complete Rhythm Trainer, which you can find on App Store, but of course there are tons of others. But these exercises, games and apps, of course, they develop primarily your sense of rhythm, so your ability to read or replicate or repeat rhythmical patterns, different combinations of rhythms. But in order to train your inner sense of pulse, you have to also work actively in a little bit different way. So you have to, for example, by practicing anything, you can tap with your feet and count. So this is what my first music teacher was requiring from us, was constantly requiring us to actively count loudly and stomping with the feet at the first stage of mastering the piece. Of course, at the later stage, we would concentrate on artistic aspects. But the first stage during, let's say, my first 3 years of education, I was always required to feel the pulse, to tap the pulse of quarter notes with my feet and count the pulse of eighth notes with my mouth. And you do that like that. If you have, for example, a piece which has 4 quarters, 1, 2, 3, 4, you would count with the word "and" in between those beats, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. So then with your mouth, with your voice, you say eighth notes, pulsations, while your feet tap normal quarter notes. So this is how I was supposed to practice, like learning something like 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. This is of course quite challenging, and many people Even when I ask to do them, they kind of hesitant to do that because this is an extra effort. But if you master that ability, of course, you will be much better with your sense of pulse, sense of tempo. And of course, if you practice the piece through like that, you can easily feel where you have the tendency to run. For example, when you switch to faster notes, like here, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1. But if you feel that pulse and if you count, then you can better feel how 16 notes relate to 8 notes which you had before. So you have a better control over tempo. And if you practice like that a few months, you will tremendously improve your sense of pulsation and your steadiness, rhythmical steadiness. So that's why I would encourage you to actively work on your sense of pulsation, not just relying on metronome for that. So at first we develop the sense of rhythm and pulsation, and later on it turns into ability to feel different levels of pulsation simultaneously. Yeah, so while playing quarter notes, you would feel eighth notes. While playing eighth notes, you would feel quarter notes, and so on. Like for example, in Bach, this is essential. Yeah, so while you play eighth notes, you feel 16 notes, taka 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 tam, and while you play 16 notes, you feel 8 notes, pum 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 pum. So that sensation of different levels of pulsation simultaneously is very important in music. This ability to quickly change the pulsation, to point your attention to a certain pulsation level, facilitates the use of rubato. For example, when you have ritenuto while playing longer chords, you just switch your attention to the pulsations that fill them. Like for example, here in Schumann's Fantasy. One, two, three, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, and then even 1 and 2 and 3 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 1 and 2 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 1. So you use those 16 note pulsations in order to calculate your ritenuto in a very controlled, precise fashion. And when you have a certain listening experience, you can feel very well when a performer plays such spots, like let's say randomly, not feeling those smaller pulsations, and when a performer is able to really control the way they time these chords by feeling those smaller pulsations. And the sense of pulsation, of course, affects a lot your usage of rubato. And this is a special topic, and I hope to make a very detailed video on rubato someday. But I'm going to just quickly mention that there are different types of rubato, different causes why we would need rubato. Sometimes we need rubato to mark a style. Like, for example, if you want to play a valse, like Chopin valse, you need to give your first beat a bit more significance, like so it can be kind of a bit 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. It can be kind of a bit longer, more significant than beats 2 and 3. In Schubert also you would take a bit more time after the first beat, which is marked forzato here in this case, and also sometimes after the third beat in case it's accented at the end of the phrase. So those micro rubatos, they exist here in order to mark the style, to bring that kind of valse sensation. But sometimes rubato is just a reaction on tension. So we might use rubato when something significant is happening. And in the previous video about tension in music, I was given such examples. I hope we are going to experiment with it and discuss it in more detail in a special video dedicated to rubato. But here I would just quickly mention that there are two major types, like how you can make your rubato. Which people usually call German school of rubato and Russian school of rubato. Well, I personally don't really like these nationalist schools, like French school, German school, whatever. I find these are just unhealthy patriotic gimmicks, because in the time of recordings, in the times when we listen to each other all over the place already for 100 years, those differences, if they were anytime present. They are blended so much and intertwined that, in my opinion, it's useless to speak about any kind of national school. And I myself have studied with a few teachers from like Moscow Conservatory. They were like the most opposite teachers I could meet in my life. That's why I don't really like that terminology, but this is how these things were communicated to me from other musicians. That's why I unfortunately have to use them here. So in German school of rubato, it's so-called German school of rubato, you make rubato after reaching the first beat. So you first reach the first beat and then you take time. So for example, in this Chopin ballad, it would be something... Of course, that's an exaggerated, very rough version, but the essence is that you first reach the first beat. And then expand it a little bit, giving a listener time to actually understand what has happened, that there is a major event, that painful C natural happens in the musical line, in the melody. Or you can take time before the beat. Before reaching the first beat. And this second way, which is also called Russian type rubato, is a quite dangerous one, I would say, because quite often it makes people sound like a hiccup when you stop before the strong beat, and I would not advise to like use it too often. Maybe in some particular spots like this one it works really well, but overall in many spots it doesn't really work well, and at least for many people. For example, one example of a musician who does it quite convincingly is of course Grigory Sokolov, and you can listen to his interpretations, and he exaggerates musical expressiveness in such a powerful and unique way that it kind of feels organic when he does it. But I actually would not do it because I don't really like how I sound with this type of rubato if I do it really often. That's why there is a certain danger connected with it. Just remember, it might sound a bit weird, like breaking the line, like a hiccup, like a stop, and disrupting the flow of the music. So I hope this video was interesting and helpful for some of you. Please share in comments with me and with other learners your best practices, your best exercises or resources for training rhythm, pulsation, and of course about rubato. I'm really curious to hear your thoughts and your experiences about it. Don't forget to subscribe to this channel and have fun playing piano.